Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Well, this time we're tackling a book that's caused a lot of buzz, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm ready to dig in and see what Robert Kiyosaki's all about. Got the book right here and some extra notes too, just in case.
Yeah, this one sparked a ton of debate over the years. It really gets people thinking differently about money, for sure.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Oh.
So listeners, are you ready? Let's unpack this and see if it changes how you think about wealth too.
Let's go. Kiyosaki doesn't hold back, so this should be good.
All right, so the book kicks off with this idea of two dads. Kiyosaki had his own dad who, went to college and all that, but struggled financially. And then there's his friend's dad, the rich dad, who's a successful entrepreneur, even though he didn't have a fancy degree.
It's a great way to set up the whole book. Two different paths, two different outcomes. One follows the traditional route.
Yeah,
Education, secure job, steady paycheck.
right. But Kiyosaki's own dad, even with the education and working hard, never really achieves financial security. It's kind of like the system isn't always enough.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, the rich dad builds wealth through starting businesses and investing. A totally different approach.
And that leads to this core lesson. Work to learn, don't work for money. Kiyosaki tells this story about working for his rich dad for 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, who would do that? But the point is, the rich dad wasn't teaching him about earning a wage. He was teaching him about financial intelligence.
It's like understanding how money works, not just how to earn a bit of it.
Totally. Like how to make it work for you, how to break free from just trading your time for a paycheck.
And Kiyosaki really drives it home, saying the poor and middle class work for money, while the rich have their money work for them. Now, has anyone listening ever thought about it that way? Are you working for your money, or is it working for you?
Whoa, that's a question to ponder, right? And it goes right into another big idea, assets versus liabilities. Kiyosaki's got this definition that's so simple, but mind-blowing. An asset puts money in my pocket. A liability takes money out.
And he challenges this whole idea of a house being an asset. He says for most people, it's a liability.
Yeah, think about it. You've got the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, repairs. It's constantly costing you money.
Unless, of course, you're renting it out and making money from it.
Yeah.
But for most folks, it's just a place to live, not an income-generating asset.
Totally. And this leads us to this idea of minding your own business. Kiyosaki's saying build assets, don't just focus on a bigger salary. Start thinking like an entrepreneur, even if you've got a regular job.
He uses this example of Ray Kroc, McDonald's guy. Kroc said he wasn't in the hamburger business, he was in real estate.
Owning the land under those McDonald's was the real gold mine. That's leverage.
So what kind of assets could you acquire, even if you're not buying property right now? Think outside the box, people.
Oh yeah, there's tons of stuff. Stocks that pay dividends, online courses that bring in passive income, even a side hustle that brings in extra cash.
Exactly. It's all about shifting the focus from just earning a paycheck to building streams of income from assets that work for you, even when you're not.
Now, this is where things get a little more controversial, I think. Kiyosaki gets into taxes and corporations, and it gets people fired up.
He basically argues that the rich don't just work harder, they play the game differently. They know how to use corporations to legally reduce their taxes, which, people have strong opinions about.
It's definitely thought-provoking. He's saying the rich use the system to their advantage, while the poor and middle class end up shouldering more of the burden.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. And Kiyosaki connects this to his idea that the rich invent money. He uses this example of Alexander Graham Bell offering to sell his telephone patent to Western Union for $100,000, and they turned him down.
Wow, imagine missing out on that. Talk about a missed opportunity, right?
Yeah, right. He's saying the rich are often the ones who think outside the box, come up with creative solutions, and take calculated risks.
He's challenging us to think bigger, to be open to new ideas, even if they seem a little unconventional.
Now, all this sounds good in theory, but Kiyosaki knows there are roadblocks that keep people from building wealth. He lists 5: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
These are like internal barriers, They can hold us back, even if we have all the right knowledge and tools. Like, take fear, for example. Kiyosaki argues the fear of losing money is often stronger than the desire to be rich.
It can totally paralyze us, keep us from taking chances, and keep us stuck in our comfort zone. He even tells the story about his rich dad taking him and his friend to the Alamo to explain this.
The Alamo, that's an interesting connection.
Right. But the rich dad uses the Alamo as this metaphor for overcoming fear. Even though the Texans lost the battle, they turned it into this rallying cry. Remember the Alamo. They learned from it and used it to move forward. So instead of letting fear stop you, Kiyosaki's saying, use it as a chance to grow and learn. What about cynicism? How does that play into all this?
Well, cynicism can totally blind us to opportunities. Kiyosaki says, cynics criticize and winners analyze. He's saying analyze situations instead of just writing them off as impossible or too good to be true.
It's like that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. Your mindset matters so much. It's about believing things can change, being open to different ways of seeing things.
So ditch the fear, ditch the cynicism. But what about laziness? Where does that fit in?
Oh, Kiyosaki's pretty straight up about that. He says if you're mentally lazy, then your money will also be lazy. It's about being proactive with your finances, educating yourself, looking for opportunities, taking action.
Don't just wait for wealth to magically appear, right? You gotta go after it.
Exactly. And then there are bad habits. Those can totally wreck even the best financial plan.
Oh, for sure. Overspending, not saving, piling up credit card debt. It's like running a race with weights strapped to your ankles.
Yeah, good analogy. You might be working hard, but you're not going to get very far.
And lastly, we've got arrogance.
Yeah.
How does that get in the way of financial success?
Kiyosaki says arrogance often hides ignorance. Those folks who think they know it all, they're not open to new ideas, new chances.
The classic know-it-all who refuses to learn anything new. They might think they're on top, but they're setting themselves up for a fall. So how do we actually do this then? Kiyosaki talks about getting started on the path to financial freedom.
Right. He's got some advice there. Finding mentors, figuring out the formulas, paying yourself first, surrounding yourself with smart people. He's got this great line, there is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it.
It's about training yourself to spot the opportunities, right?
Absolutely. He talks about learning fast, mastering a formula, and then learning a new one.
Which is so important these days. Things change so quickly. You got to be constantly learning and adapting.
Right. And one of those key formulas is paying yourself first, setting aside money for savings and investments before you pay your bills.
It's about prioritizing your future self, your future financial well-being.
Exactly. He shows the difference between the financial statements of people who do that versus those who don't. It's powerful.
It takes discipline, for sure. Especially when things get tight, resisting the urge to dip into savings or sell off assets to cover bills.
It's about keeping your eye on the long-term goal.
Kiyosaki also talks about finding advisors who are smarter than you, building a team of experts to guide you.
Like your own personal board of directors. People who have your best interests at heart and can give you solid advice.
And speaking of advice, Kiyosaki suggests this interesting tactic, being an Indian giver. This one always gets me thinking.
It's a concept that's easily misunderstood. He's drawing on Native American tradition, where gift giving wasn't always permanent. It was about exchange, building relationships through reciprocity.
So how does this apply to building wealth? Are we supposed to give away money and expect it to come back?
Not quite. It's more about generosity, sharing your knowledge, your resources, your connections to create abundance. He believes when you give freely, it often returns to you in unexpected ways.
He even tells a story about times when he felt short of money or help, and realizing the solution was to give first what he wanted. He says, and when I gave, it always came back.
That's a pretty powerful idea, isn't it? Generosity is a catalyst for abundance. It's not about expecting something back, but about creating a positive flow.
I'm starting to see how all these ideas, even if they seem different, fit together. Kiyosaki's pushing us to think differently about money, wealth, and what we're capable of.
He's challenging the usual ways of doing things, suggesting there are other paths to financial freedom. Paths that might mean stepping out of our comfort zone, questioning what we believe, and embracing new ways of thinking and acting.
One of the big frameworks he introduces is the cash flow quadrant. It shows 4 different ways people make income: as an employee, self-employed, business owner, or investor.
It's such a visual way to see those different paths. Most people start as employees or self-employed, right?
Right.
Trading time for money, basically.
Right, but Kiyosaki's saying true financial freedom comes from being a business owner or investor, where you're building something that works for you.
He uses this analogy of Ed and Bill, the water carriers. Ed hauls buckets back and forth all day. Bill builds a pipeline.
Ed's working for money, Bill's got his money working for him.
Exactly. And the great thing about being a business owner or investor is that you leverage systems and assets to create wealth, even when you're not actively working.
So how do you actually make that shift from employee or self-employed to business owner or investor? What can people do?
Well, first, you got to shift your mindset. Start thinking like an entrepreneur, looking for ways to create value, build systems, leverage assets.
It's like going from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, believing there's enough opportunity out there for everyone to succeed.
Right. And being willing to take risks, to learn from mistakes, and to keep going even when things get tough.
This isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long game. Requires commitment, dedication, and a willingness to step outside that comfort zone.
One thing Kiyosaki emphasizes is converting earned income into passive income and portfolio income. Earned income's your job, your self-employment. Passive income's from assets like rental properties or royalties. Portfolio income's investments, stocks, bonds, that kind of thing.
It's about diversifying, creating multiple streams of income that don't rely on you constantly trading your time.
Right. It's about building a portfolio of income-generating assets that keep working, even while you sleep.
Now, I know Kiyosaki can be a controversial figure. Some people love his unconventional approach. Others think he oversimplifies things or gives advice that's not always realistic.
It's true. Not everyone agrees with everything he says. But his message about financial literacy is super important, I think. He's pushing people to take charge of their financial futures, to learn how money actually works.
He wants people to understand the rules so they can play the game strategically and create the financial life they want.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a starting point, not the end-all be-all. It's meant to get you thinking, challenge your assumptions, and inspire you to take action.
It's a wake-up call to question things, to create a financial future that aligns with what you value and what you want to achieve.
You know, what's interesting is how Kiyosaki doesn't just talk about like budgeting and investing. He brings in this whole other layer.
Right. It's like the philosophy behind wealth building. He wants you to connect your financial goals with like a deeper purpose.
Yeah, it's not just about stacking cash. It's about making sure your money aligns with your values, what you're passionate about, what you want to give back to the world. He's a big believer in finding your own path, not just following the usual script of getting a job and climbing the ladder.
He's all about thinking. What really lights you up? What are you good at? And how can you use that to create a life that's both fulfilling and financially successful?
He even talks about going to personal development seminars, exploring spirituality, trying different ways of learning. He's showing that self-discovery takes many forms.
It's about being open to new ideas, expanding your horizons, and always seeking growth in your finances and as a person.
And he really emphasizes the importance of community and support.
He talks about these cash flow clubs he started where people can learn about money, play this cash flow game, and encourage each other on their journeys.
Surrounding yourself with people who get it, who share your goals, can make such a difference.
So it's not just about mastering the technical stuff, but also about building the right mindset, connecting with people, finding your tribe.
It's a more holistic approach to wealth, for sure. Mind, body, and spirit.
Okay, before we wrap up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there's this one thing Kiyosaki says that's kind of insightful, but also a little scary.
His take on job security and retirement.
Exactly. He's saying the traditional model of working for a company and relying on a pension or even Social Security,
Yeah.
it's not as stable as it used to be.
Yeah, it's true. We see it already with pensions disappearing and more people relying on 401ks and Social Security. Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Right? And his point is, this puts more responsibility on us to take charge of our own financial future.
It's not enough to just work hard and climb the ladder anymore. You got to be financially smart, build assets, have multiple income streams.
He's predicting more people will be creating their own businesses and innovations, like Alexander Graham Bell, but also more bankruptcies, layoffs, and economic shakeups.
It's a call to be prepared, adaptable, and resilient. The world's changing faster than ever.
So what can our listeners do? How can they navigate this changing landscape?
Kiyosaki's message is pretty clear. Invest in your financial education, learn those entrepreneurial skills, and build a solid base of assets that can weather the storms.
Don't rely on one source of income. Diversify your investments and be ready to jump on new opportunities and face new challenges.
It's about taking control, creating a life of freedom and security, no matter what the future throws at you.
I know all this can sound overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out on your financial journey.
Right, but Kiyosaki says it's never too late to start learning, growing, and taking action.
He encourages everyone to start small, take those first steps, and celebrate the wins along the way.
It's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. Keep moving forward.
Even if you mess up, hit a roadblock, feel unsure, don't give up.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep those financial goals in sight.
To wrap up our look at Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I want to share some of Kiyosaki's own words that really stuck with me. He quotes Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken.
Ooh, that's a good one.
He says, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference."
Powerful. It reminds me that the most rewarding paths are often the less conventional ones. The ones that take guts, creativity, and a willingness to create your own way.
Kiyosaki wants us to question things, look at things from different angles, and build a life that reflects our own values and dreams.
It's about breaking free from the mold.
He also says, most people struggle financially because they simply do what everyone else does. It takes courage to move from the left side of the cash flow quadrant to the right side.
He's saying that real financial freedom often means stepping outside of your comfort zone, challenging the norms, and changing the way you think about money and wealth.
And he really encourages us to embrace learning. He says, if you do not feel comfortable with financial numbers, then spend some time with them and become comfortable.
Financial literacy is like a muscle. You can train it. The more comfortable you get with managing money, the more confident you'll be making financial decisions.
One last thought-provoking line from Kiyosaki. You and your children's future will be determined by the choices you make today, not tomorrow.
Whoa. Our actions have consequences, right? What we do today impacts not only ourselves, but also future generations.
So as we finish this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I encourage you to think about what really resonated with you.
What sparked your interest? What are you inspired to do differently?
Remember, financial freedom is a journey, not a destination.
And with the right knowledge, the right mindset, and the right support, you can create a life of abundance and purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.